Let's call this meeting to order. To get started, can we all rise and ask Miss Sandy Till if she would lead us in a prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, dear Lord, we're so excited to be here tonight, dear Lord, to handle the business of the parish. Lord, we pray for each one of the council members, for our parish president, and for our legal council, dear Lord, that you would give them wisdom and knowledge and discernment, dear Lord, to bring you glory, that their actions and their decisions would be on behalf of the people that they represent. Lord, we lift up all our military wherever they are in the world, that you would guard them and protect them until the day that they would be able to come home. Lord, we give you all the glory for everything because you alone are worthy. And it's in Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Miss Sandy. Mr. Scooter, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is a Livingston Parish Council meeting, Thursday, January the 28th, 6 o'clock p.m. in Livingston, Louisiana. All publications have been sent out and notices have been posted officially that is required by law. I call this meeting to order. Miss Sandy Till, would you be so kind as to call the roll, please?
Mr. Ard.
Here.
Mr. Garlinghouse.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. King.
Here.
Mr. Talbert.
Here.
Mr. Mack.
Here.
Mr. Lobel.
Here.
Mr. Averett.
Here.
Mr. Wascom.
Here. If you have a cell phone, please take just a moment and turn it off so you're not embarrassed if it rings. We will have input from the public on items that come up. If an item comes up and you want to speak on that item, please raise your hand and we'll acknowledge you. Try to keep your comments to around 3 minutes and try not to repeat yourself. Sometimes they can get long. We keep item 7 on the agenda as a presentation. I'd like to read this proclamation from the Livingston Parish Council. We'd like to recognize in the audience with us here tonight, Mr. Cade Savick. Cade is a graduate of Marpaw High School. After graduating high school, he went to Southwest Mississippi Community College on a baseball scholarship. After playing 2 years at Southwest, he was given an opportunity to play baseball for our Fighting LSU Tigers. He ended his college career at LSU in 2015 with many honors, including first All-American, College World Series All-American Tournament team, first team All-SEC, an SEC All-Defensive team, and my favorite, the SEC Academic Honor Roll and Johnny Bench Award finalist. Cade is currently playing with the Detroit Tigers organization after being drafted by the Detroit Tigers in the 4th round of the Major League Baseball draft. Cade has proven that hard work and dedication will help you achieve your dreams. We would like to thank Cade for being a positive role model for our youth and for the way he has represented Livingston Parish. I'd like to thank you, Cade Savick. Would you please come up here and let's take a picture with the parish. Come on in, man. Get the parish president over here.
I got a real wide. We got to do that sideways. Like you feel like sideways.
That's your belly moving.
Where's David Norman when you need him, Mike? Something new. Can we breathe?
Not you.
Ready? Ready?
something?
Bye. That's what he said.
Thank you, Dave.
Second of February. I believe Kate will be leaving February the 2nd for the Major League Baseball camps and won't be back till when, Kate?
Around October 1st.
October 1st. So our prayers will be with you, and we know you'll make us proud. We'll be watching for you on TV, my friend. Item 8 is adoption of minutes, and we're going to ask that we pull this from the agenda. I think Ms. Sandy needed the next, we're going to adopt them for the next council meeting. We just got a little delayed in putting all the minutes together, so if that's okay, we'll pull that one. Item 9, Parish President's Report, Mr. Leighton Ricks.
Thank you, Mr. Love. I'd like to ask y'all, item A, the road program. We have the $3.5 million that I had told y'all about, and we were asking you to adopt a resolution to extend the contract with R.J. Daigle so that we can continue to move forward on the road program in the next phase. We're able to, first of all, able to save a lot of money by not relocating, having them bodies already out here working, and take advantage of the low gas prices. So we're asking y'all to approve that.
You need that in the form of a motion.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse.
Motion.
Second by Mr. Talbot that would be for the change order, correct?
No,
Yes. No. No. Extend the contract.
Extend the contract, okay. Any discussion? Call for the vote, please, Ms. Sandy.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes,
Thank you, council. And,
Mr. President. At this point, since you're talking about the road program, we have an addendum. Can we pick up an item on the addendum that refers to this road program? It's to add some roads to the,
no, wait till you get.
Okay, we'll wait.
Yeah, wait till you get to that. Item B, in the past, for Human Services Authority, we have 2 members that represent us. In the past, the former parish president would make those appointments, but it's really a council appointment. And then tonight, we're coming with Ms. Swallow, I'm gonna mess this up, Ms. Lagia Swallow, who is on the board, but needs to be reappointed now for another term. So I'm asking y'all to do that, because this is really y'all's appointment. So
is she present
She
tonight?
would like to continue to serve, so I need a resolution supporting that.
Is she present tonight?
I don't know if I don't think she's present tonight.
Isn't she chairman of that, isn't she
Yes.
chairman of that board, and they passed a resolution asking
Yeah.
that she continue? I'd like to make the motion.
Yeah.
Motion by Mr. Talbot, second by Mr. Jeff Averett. Any discussion? None being, call for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Thank you,
Yeah.
council.
Mr. Lobel? Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
I thought y'all were good. Thank you. Thank you, council.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, did you have a Department of Public Works, Mr. Sam? Did you have some items on the agenda for, under under the road program report?
I just need a friend, man. You know,
I'm sorry?
I need a friend. I need a best friend. I got a bunch of them. But the first on the agenda is to authorize Southern Light Fiber LLC to place their fiber in our right-of-way. We went out there. It shouldn't be a problem. It's on Pea Ridge Road or off Pea Ridge Road. If it ever has to be addressed, it'll be addressed under their nickel. We won't have to do it. So in order to place it in our right-of-way, we need permission from you guys. And we have went out there and researched the situation. Everything's okay. If they have a problem with it, though, they're gonna replace it. They're gonna fix it, you know.
Is there a motion from the board?
I'll make a motion. That's John Barber Road, right, Mr. Sands?
Yes, sir. Off the
Okay.
P Ridge, yes.
For
sir.
Southern
John
Light
Barber. I'm
Fiber
sorry,
LLC
Shane.
to
That's
place
your
that
area.
fiber in the parish right away.
Yes,
Make
sir.
that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Shane Mack.
I'll second.
Making a second by Mr. Jeff Ard. Any discussion? None being, called for the vote, Ms. Sandy?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Waskom?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is for the parish to enter a lease agreement with Doggett for 3 excavators. We have 3 now that's expiring, and we're gonna get 3 new ones. And we just need you guys to bless it so we can take the ones we've got now and replace them with 3 new ones.
I'll offer that motion.
Motion by Mr. Bubba Harris,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Scooter King. Any discussion? None being called for the vote.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Waskom?
Yes.
Next on the agenda, Ms. Wascom, is surplus equipment. We want to put some equipment on surplus, stuff that we don't use anymore, and I just need you guys to authorize that for me to do.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Jeff Averett. Hold up. 1 second, Ms. Sandy.
I'll need to read it by title
Yep,
first,
Ms.
please.
Sandy's got the,
If that's okay with you. This will be proposed ordinance 16-01, an ordinance to declare certain movable property, equipment no longer needed for public purposes, provide for its sale by internet sales and/or public auction, and provide for the terms of the sale. Public hearing to be held on February 25th at 6 p.m.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Averett and second by Mr. Ard. Any discussion? None being, would you call for the vote, Ms. Sandy?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Waskom?
Yes.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sam.
Wait. 8-3 addendum. We got the other lease with Doggett on the,
It's all down the agenda, but we can do it now.
let's address, I mean, don't you think we ought to address it now while he's up here?
That's fine. It's an addendum item, Mr. Wascom.
Yes, I see
It's,
it.
we appropriated money for, what we call a pontoon, excavator on pontoon, so we can enter these canals and start working. I need authorization from you guys in order to go into a lease with these folks.
I'll make the motion. We talked about it at finance today and with Ms. Myers and everything's
You're satisfied with this?
satisfied that.
Motion.
It was originally scheduled as a purchase and they reevaluated and decided to lease and everything's fine with the current budget, so we'd like to recommend it.
And we've also run this through Mr. Moody, all the little details to it. He looked at it today, and I believe he gave us a thumbs up on it.
Motion by Mr. Gary Talbot, second by Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse. Any discussion? None being called for the vote, Ms. Sandy.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Thank
Mr.
you, sir.
Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Waskom?
Yes, thank you, Sam. The next item is item 10, is a quality assurance panel recommendation. I believe Mr. Jeff Averett had requested this be on the board. Mr. Jeff, can I give you the floor, or?
Yes, we, quality assurance, meeting the other night, we recommended to go with a 4-year contract this time instead of a 2-year contract with the Acadian Ambulance.
Okay, before we open it up for discussion, let's see if we got a second, a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion that we go 4 years.
I second.
Motion by Mr. Averett, seconded by Mr. Gary Talbot to go for a 4-year renewal contract. Any discussion?
I think
Yes, sir.
there's some people I think that want to discuss.
Well, I see a hand over here. You're welcome to come to the microphone. If you'll state your name and your address, if you would, in whatever district you happen to live in. And then as well, if you would just try to, keep it at 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Richard Frederick, 10825 Field Point Drive, Denham Springs, in Mr. King's district right there off Arnold Road. A little bit about myself, you may not know me. Lifelong resident here at Livingston Parish. I'm president of my HOA, which is a 61-lot development, and also a very much proud new father. I've served on various committees regarding EMS issues at the local, state, and national level. I have roughly 10 years of experience with EMS operations and agendas, and I'm here to share with you a few concerns regarding the Acadian Ambulance contract. By this time, I hope that each of you have received an email in detail certain concerns that I have, as well as a copy of the contract. Before I go into it, I do want to acknowledge my peers at Acadian Ambulance for their strong work and excellent service that they provide for our parish. Very much thank you. They have a very difficult job out here. A few of the discrepancies that I have with the contract includes the actual age of the contract, the fact that it was drafted so many years ago without any recent amendments. There are unnecessary penalizations towards both Acadian Ambulance and our parish, specifically under response times. I discussed it minimally at the Quality Assurance Panel on Monday regarding Code 1 versus Code 3 differentiation. That would be penalizing Acadian. I feel that the due diligence of the Quality Control Panel is lacking after witnessing it for myself Monday. There's been self-admission from a few panel members for failure to review times accordingly, as well as lack of regular meetings. And personally, I feel there should be an EMS professional that sits on that panel to help oversee an EMS agenda. There is a refusal clause in there that needs some clarification and possibly add a few things to where we could increase those times or remove them. There's no identifying way to know if third-party 911 callers are assessed and added to that population, as well as if it's per call that a refusal would increase that percentage, or is it per patient refusal per call. Since it's been so long and the population density has increased, I'm almost done.
No, it's fine, that's fine.
The population density has increased throughout the parish over the past 8 years. I would ask that there be taking a harder look at the response zones and their actual calculation of where they fall as far as urban, suburban, and rural. Maybe shrink down some of the times acceptable, as well as a presentation of a physical map of Livingston Parish that details whether it be a shaded area, oblong, circles, that defines where these response zones are to avoid any confusion whenever Acadian presents their numbers. I know that I've spoke to just a couple of the council members. I haven't had a chance to speak to everyone. I've tried reaching out. You guys are new, and I'm not going to fault you. I know there was a lot of confusion with the contract and understanding it, which would cause me to be slightly hesitant about approving such a lengthy contract without further detail. I do oppose a 4-year contract due to the ever-changing environment at EMS. I am okay with a 2-year contract. For the time being, instead of that, I would request that a 6-month contract be signed today to give time for the Quality Assurance Panel to reseat, address my concerns, and give time for the council to further understand this contract before they vote on it. Again, I have no personal issues with Acadian. I love them guys. I'm very good friends with many of their employees. They've done a really, really good job with the parish. I just think it's important that we make sure everything is square and finite before we continue forward. Thank you so much.
Mr. Richard, thank you. Mr. Harold, did you want to, Mr. Ward, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I'll say a few things. We had our standard meeting. Mr. Everett was on the committee. We waited until he was appointed to do it. We really don't have issues with times, and I don't think there's a fireman nor the 911 director saw any issues. I don't see what the issues are with that, and you know, there's been some subsidy things brought out. I'm not for subsidizing a private company, and I doubt if you are either, but they've done excellent work. They work well with all the departments. They come out for every special event, no charge. I think the idea of giving them a 4-year contract shows them that we're working with them and they work with us well. So I recommend a 4-year contract.
No, actually, the contract's gonna expire December 31, 2019. Is that,
That, I'll have to go back and look at it.
but we can't actually overlap into the term of the new council, so that's when it would
Well,
take.
what we do, we bring it in. We did this last one. Instead of renewing it for 2 more years, we shortened it to a year. So when you came in office, you would have the 4 years. So you almost have to overlap it a month. So the new council, if you have them, comes in after 4 years, can vote on it.
And doesn't this contract have a revisit clause? I mean, either party could revisit it at some point in time. or-
If you have any discrepancies, you can cancel the contract, terminate it if they do not meet their requirements. As they can do it as well.
Right.
And there are some things that we do not meet, and they've not had any comments about it, so I think we have a
30
good
days.
relationship.
30-day cancellation.
Mhm. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
So that's my recommendation as well.
Thank you.
I know we had a motion from Mr. Averett, there was a second
I'll
from
second.
Mr. Gary Talbert. Any comments from the board? None? Ms. Sandy, would you call the vote, please?
Can you repeat what the motion is, please?
Sure, I believe, I'm gonna let Mr. Averett do that. That was to appoint Acadian Ambulance to,
Acadian Ambulance for a 4-year contract
for the parish for
for the
Livingston.
parish.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. The next item on the agenda is item 11. I believe this is Mr. Mark Harrell as well for the Office of Homeland Security.
And I apologize for having so much up here tonight, but it's just the way it falls out. And the question was asked, could you group all the LGAP stuff into one? Unfortunately, we have to have a resolution for each one in case they kick one out. But Mr. Moody may have a solution to it, but it's 11 of them that we have to do.
I mean, personally, I think you could adopt all resolutions at one time, direct the clerk to create separate resolutions.
Perfect.
That would save on 11 times 9 votes, so.
All right, so let me explain this. This is the LGAP grant. It comes around every year. And what we try to do is help some of the areas that is lacking some funds. And you'll see there's a lot of stuff in there for fire districts that struggle. And we put those in. We don't know if we're gonna actually get that funding. The state goes through it and they say, oh, yeah, no, yeah, or we cut it in half or whatever, depending on their funding in the end. And then on the Historic Carter House, the Hungarian Settlement Museum, that's every year. So it's a standard grant that we do this time of year every year.
And I see a resolution for a sandbagging machine.
Yes, sir. We purchased one. We want to get another one.
Okay.
We have it worked out with our workforce, public workforce group with the sheriff's office to do the sandbagging.
And also a resolution authorizing the final acceptance of the hazard mitigation plan.
That
update.
one, can you do that one at the same?
Yeah, we did that one separate.
Yeah.
So you would need a motion to approve all resolutions A
Through
LGAP.
K.
through K.
I got a question. I'm just kind of new at this. How come all the fire department districts are not, fire protection districts are not listed? I mean,
Some of them have more funds than others, and they're gonna kick some of this out, but we try to get the ones that just don't have the tax base. There are some fire departments out there that struggle. I mean, struggle, and that's why we're trying to help them. There's some, well, Mr. Klasky's in here, there's some that have the funds. So, yeah, we only have so much money. We need to help the ones that are struggling. And I mean, they're really struggling. They just barely make it year after year. So that's why I threw them all in there. I looked out for the first responders. I don't care what it is, and they need the help.
The question was, how come all of them wasn't in here? Are all the fire protection districts listed?
No, sir. The ones that have funding that I feel can support themselves, I didn't put them in. You only have $100,000
Yes, sir.
for this grant. Unfortunately, your municipalities apply for this grant as well. We don't know what they're applying for. So every bit of this may be kicked back. I got it up to the max, and that's as far as we could go. We don't know what the municipalities are doing. We hope to remedy that solution. Mr. Layton and I have talked about it and come up with a plan to bring the municipalities to the table and come up with a solution so we know every year what part will be the parishes to divide up.
So is this something that we look at Annually?
annually. Yes, sir, this year, this time of the year, every year.
Okay. Appreciate you, Mr. Mark, for answering those questions.
Thank you.
Joe, did you have a comment regarding that?
My only comment, I'm Fire District 5 Chief, is that the limited amount of funds that come in, we're actually able to sustain ourselves. If we took a cut, it would diminish the rest of the parish and the fire districts that are substantially less capable of funding themselves. I can't speak for the city of District 4, but that's our reasoning, and Mark and I talked about it, and, you know, by the rest of us taking in funds, it just reduces what we could possibly do for the other rural fire districts in the parish. You know, so we've agreed with Mark that District 5 doesn't need, because we're not talking about a lot of money, and it would help those guys by receiving it more than it would hurt us by not receiving it.
Believe it or not, the ones that are listed in here, $2,000, $3,000 is a lot to them.
Big deal.
It's gonna either make them or break them. And I think Brian Drury will agree to that. He's one of the rural ones. It means a lot to him.
I'm Brian Drury, I'm the president of the Parish Fire Chiefs Association, and I'm fire chief down in District 2, Springfield and Killian region. Prime example of what he's saying, my department is a very busy department, and we run low on funds come October every year. This money definitely help us. You take districts such as District 11 in the northeast area of the parish, they live on $30,000 a year. Okay?
I think it was less than that.
Or less, yes, and so this money is actually the only money they utilize to purchase equipment for safety of the firefighters and to help them do their job. So, yeah, it's a good thing. I support it, and as Chief Brzezowski says, you know, some of the departments that aren't listed, they have a lot better funding than those of us in the rural part of the parish.
Mr. Shane, you feel like that?
It was well explained, and I appreciate y'all's explanation.
Thank you.
What's needed is a motion to adopt resolutions A through K.
I'd like to make that motion.
Motion by Mr. King,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Shane Mack. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Cindy, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Waskom?
Yes. Before you leave, we have an item L, I believe you want, for the
Yeah,
resolution.
Resolution. You're probably not aware of the hazard mitigation program or the plan. That's the program that allows us to elevate the homes and stuff in your districts that flood on a continual basis. Drainage projects. It did the 7 bridges that were placed throughout the parish over the last couple of years. Actually, disaster recovery funding is doing the new communications tower, so that's what this is. In the past, my department could rewrite the plan, send it to the feds, and get it approved. Unfortunately, but in one respect, but fortunately in another, every municipality must participate now. They tell you how many times you have to meet. You cannot miss a single meeting. If a municipality misses one meeting, they're out of the plan. So I couldn't do anything in your area if Springfield didn't come to these meetings. I mean, that's just the way it is. I'd like to brag on the municipalities. No one missed a single meeting. We are actually the parish that we got the first plan approved. We didn't hire it out to a contractor. We did it in-house. And everyone participated to come up with some good ideas. So when you do talk to municipalities, brag on them a little bit because it's new and they've excelled at it. But it was just time to renew it, so I'm asking y'all to adopt it. FEMA has approved it prior to adoption, so you have to adopt it by resolution.
So it'd be a resolution authorizing a final acceptance of the hazard mitigation plan.
Correct.
Update.
I'll make that.
Motion by Mr. Jeff Averett. Seconded by Mr. Bubba Harris.
Yes.
Any discussion?
Mr. Harris, every other municipality's already approved this plan.
Yes, sir. I have their
We're the
resolution.
last group to do it, so.
Well, I can't bring it to you until I
they-
know who's accepted it, and they've done it, so that's why it's here tonight.
Any more discussion? None being Miss Sandy, call for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Liddell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Mark, do you have an item on the addendum?
Yes, sir, and I apologize for having to do an addendum. I think I've only done one in 3.5 years. But this item, it was some funding that was left over from our waterway debris project that we just completed. I was able to swap this funding over and cover some emergency protective measures that happened during Isaac. It's recovering some of our 25% costs. And they said, you can do it, but we've got to do it now. So that's why there's an addendum. So I would like the resolution approved for that, if you would.
And that'd be a resolution approving, certifying the application submittal of the Parish Public Assistance Cost Share Project in the amount of $118,401.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And 43 cents. Motion by Mr. Ard, second by Mr. Tab Lobel. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Liddell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Thank you, folks, and
Thank you, Mark.
welcome aboard.
Next item, number 12, is Planning Commission recommendations. Mr. Sam DiGirolamo, once again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think everyone has a kind of what I call a cheat sheet in front of them, and you're looking at the same thing I'm looking at, so it's got the plans in it, and it's got the vote in it from the Planning Commission. First on the agenda is the aggregate development, Lee Martin Road, Borrow Pit. Developer is Mr. Dennis Stewart. Engineering, Alvin Fairburn and Associates. It's in Mr. Jeff Ard's district. Location, Lee Martin Road. It is a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the preliminary site plan for the, approve the preliminary site plan for the Lee Martin Road, Borrow Pit.
All right, we have a motion. Motion by Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse. Second by Mr. Shane Mack for approve this preliminary site plan. That's in Council's District 1, I believe. We have a motion and second discussion. Mr. Harris, is that? All right, Mr. Sam, you want to give him just for a minute here, Mr. Harris? If you'll take just a minute and tell us your name and
All right, Henry Harris, I live in District 5, Harris Road. Some of us been here so much, we feel like we need to say, welcome aboard.
thank you, Mr.
Thank
Harris.
you for serving. I was scanning the agenda. We have 8 projects y'all gonna be working on here in the next few minutes, involving 6 councils. That's big. Now, specifically to this item, Mr. Ard, I believe it says it's gonna be digging a borrow pit, right? Which you're gonna remove and displace dirt, right? Okay, sir. Now, when we move that dirt here, we're gonna usually build up a place over there, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, we go through the process in developing this land. And we have 8 projects tonight, so we're talking considerable land in a lot of area and impact on a lot of people. Actually, development and following, well, in the future, indefinitely following the development. Now, when we change elevation of the land and we drive down the road and see a house that much higher than the road level of the road, that's gonna impact the drainage and what happens to the people that live next to it, people live on south in the watershed as a normal thing. So we're getting to the point, we've gotten past the point of just too many houses flooding every year. And the FEMA flood maps tell us that this flooding and these high, intolerable, insurmountable flood insurance premiums, which will probably be going to the $5,000 mark in 3 or 4 years, we'll get another revised FEMA amount. Just tells us there's no end. Now, I pay $5,000 a year flood insurance premium. That money's gone. Not a penny of it goes to preventing someone's house from flooding, and it does not do a thing for the drainage. Now, I know we have drainage impact statements that comply with parish ordinances, and it's used in the process of doing this. I don't believe you can tell me where one drainage impact study has ever stopped it raining. And it has had no impact on how much water flows off through no telling how many houses, maybe hundreds. It flows through before it gets to Lake Marquardt. And having said that, and we all live with it and have lived with it for years, and we're going to continue to live with it. Having said that, I'm not saying don't approve this, don't do anything, but I am asking you to defer action until on this project and the following projects, until such time the drainage impact study specifies, being exact on the number of homes that have the potential to be flooded from that project or surrounding projects, and be notified of that. And what I'm saying, the engineer that does this can, with a little effort, give you a pretty good target figure on how many and how much this development improvement is going to have on the rest of the parish. And I've addressed this from a little different perspective previously with the council previously. I mentioned to them, and I'm just filling in.
Mr. Harris,
Yeah.
we try to keep a 3-minute time limit.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm through. Before, I suggested a development fee by, in the construction in the improvement that would come to the parish to be used for drainage and keep homes.
Thank you very much.
I didn't intend to, but since this is a project involving 6 council members, at this second meeting of the council, somebody needs to have a little input somewhere along the line.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you, sir. Did we have a motion on that one? No.
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Mr. Garlinghouse made the
I was
motion.
just curious, Mr. Harris, I'm sorry, John.
No, that's fine.
So you recommend that we suspend all construction until we have a resolution on where the water's gonna go? I just wanted to know what were you wanting us to do? I'm just,
The line needs to be drawn, has to be drawn, and we need to draw it. We don't need to let it be drawn 2 years down the road, because it's gonna be past help and everything at that point. Yes, sir, that's what I would say. Get on the horn in the morning, get the engineers involved, see what it takes, start getting it done, and we'll go from there.
yes, sir. All right.
That's my request. And that's for me, since I don't have many more years, that's a urgent request.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your concern.
Doesn't the plan commission look at the flood or drainage proposals on each subdivision?
Yes, sir. We have
Brought
our
up?
review team, our engineers, Fort Blotto. Once this is presented to us, they give them all the information. And I think Chad Bach is present back here. And tell me if I say something wrong, Chad, but they look at this and they look at the hydraulics, where they're digging and where they're putting it at. I mean, this is going to a commercial project in Walker. I know that's not what, Mr. Harris is referring to, but this pond is a huge pond, but there's nobody back there. And like I say, they turn in all this information to our review engineers, and he does what he needs to do with it, and he gives us a recommendation. It goes to the planning department for our planning commissioners to look at, and then once they bless it, it comes on to you. So that's the process for this boiler pit.
And I know where Mr. Harris is coming from, because I live south of him. And they've got a development going down there now. It's gonna be like 550 homes built. And he's concerned about the drainage in that area. And so am I, because he lives above that. I live below that. And water does not flow uphill, so it's gonna be coming to me. But according to the, do I?
I say in Albany it does.
Oh, in Albany? Okay, but, these have already been started, and, I've looked at the plans on those things, and most of them have engineering approval on them, I mean, for drainage, so.
There's hydraulics that's been done on this project and all these major projects that
Right.
it's cost these developers quite a bit of money. Now, that doesn't, I mean, I know there's still more work to be done.
And we're not going to solve every problem. And I know it, and everyone in this room knows it. But hopefully we can help with the drainage throughout.
Well, Mr. Sam, do you see a need for spending more money, more time, holding up more projects? Will it make a difference that we could see on the ground in flooding or,
For this particular project?
Well, for any of these down the road, we can't really.
Well, it just all depends on where the dirt's being placed. I mean,
Okay.
we've got to monitor that. I mean, Chad works real close with the planning department, and that's myself, to try. I mean, hopefully we don't hurt anybody.
Right.
But we do look at this thing. Chad is, he's my shoulder. I mean, I depend on Chad. He's led me to the, promised land. I just,
That may not be good.
Right up there.
I trust him.
That would be Livingston Parish, right?
trust you.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
I don't think it's from Livingston Parish.
Welcome to the parish.
He brought him to Springfield.
In 4 years, he's thrown me under the bus one time.
That's pretty good.
And that was 2 days ago.
You know, Mr. DiGirolamo, I think that, right now, like in his area down there, we have a larger concern than drainage right now.
Yes.
Because with the 550 house development in one area there, we don't have the infrastructure to take care of. You're gonna see at least 1,000 vehicles trying to get out every morning, going to school, and different things. But you cannot stop progress. You just can't do it.
But you can look at it. Make sure they're doing it right.
Sam,
Yes.
Sam, this particular dirt pit is most of that dirt's going to the Martin Bauer project, right?
That's correct. All of it, from what I understand.
All of it's going there.
All of it, from what I understand.
And the, Chad, I guess y'all reviewed the plans. There's retention that meets the guidelines on there's water retention at the Martin Bauer project in Walker that meet the plans to satisfy the drainage impact. Y'all did a drainage impact study and.
Yeah, it's in the city limits of Walker, but I know the city of Walker also has the same kind of drainage impact study requirements. Whether they're doing downstream improvements or on-site improvements with the district of some kind, they are being required to do that. So it's offset in some kind of way on their development. The pond, the dirt pit won't cause any trouble, you're just digging a hole so your water's coming in. Where they put the dirt is an issue, but they are taking care of it by doing some downstream improvements on the water process.
Thank you.
No more discussion. If not being, we have a motion, I believe, in a second. Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote?
Yes. Mr. R.
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Mr. Talbot.
Yes.
Mr. Mack.
Yes.
Mr. Lobel.
Yes.
Mr. Avery.
Yes.
Mr. Watson.
Yes. Item B, Mr. DiGirolamo.
Next on your agenda is your commercial development, Jubin Point Urgent Care Clinic. This is, the developer is Jubin Point LLC. This is in Mr. Bubba Harris's district. Ward 2 Water Engineering, Bradford Engineering. It is a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the preliminary site plan for the Jubin Point Urgent Care Clinic. This is on Jubin Road, south of the interstate. Bubba knows
Right.
where it's at. We've
Right.
talked to him about it.
We've discussed this before. I'll make a motion to accept that.
Motion to approve the preliminary site plan
Right.
recommended by the planning commission by Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Seconded by Mr. Jeff Ard. Any discussion? And being Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. C.
Next
Get
on
my
the
age, you
agenda
won't want
is
to
a
close it
resub, a waiver, Etta Blunt cut-through road. It's a resub with 4 lots facing a servitude. It's 5 lots, actually, it's an extra lot, and that's why the waiver comes into play, and we do not grant waivers. It goes to the planning commission for their approval, then it comes on to you guys for your final stamp. So, it was a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the waiver for Michael Comita Jr. and Philip Fauché. I think I pronounced that right.
I make a motion to grant the waiver to subdivide this referenced property.
Motion by Mr. Shane Mack. I believe it's in your district.
It is.
Yes, Mr. Shane.
Yes.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Gary Talbot. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is subdivision with improvements. This is Oak Hill Estates, 6th filing. It's to revise the preliminary plot. It's in Mr. Gary Talbot's district. It's a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the revised preliminary plat for Oak Hills Estate, 6th filing. We had a few concerns about the developer coming in and out the subdivision. What our protocol is we'll go out there and video that road that they've got to travel on, and we'll make sure that that road is not damaged no more than what it's already damaged. And if it is, it's a responsibility of the developer to fix it. There's a bridge that they've got to cross over. It's a concrete bridge, and I asked Fortin DeBlotter to run out there and look at it. They did. It's very structurally sound. Actually, it's in our DOTD inspection report. So they check it every 6 months. So that they, we will monitor it when these developments come about and have to travel in these existing subdivisions. It's a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the revised preliminary plat for Oak Hill Estate 6th filing.
Now, Mr. Sam, this is a subdivision been previously approved.
Yes,
Except-
it
and
was
they're making
approved, I
some-
think, in 2006, Gary, and I don't have that in front of
Right,
me.
so it is, it said 2006, and they're actually adding lots to it because it's gonna end the development of that subdivision,
They're adding 9 more lots. That's why we wanted to come back to the Planning Commission and on back to you
which will
guys.
kill the access to any other land around there. That'll end the 6th filing. If I was at the planning commission, it seems like
Right.
the area that had been left open was for future development behind that, and
Right.
by putting those 9 lots, they close it off.
Right.
And because of the revisit in there, we're gonna upgrade the streets to the
The
10
roads will be built to the standards that we live by today.
and 3 instead of 6 and 2.
That's right.
Okay. So by revisiting and adding the lots, we're able to upgrade the road situation in this deal. I'd like to make a motion that we approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Talbot, seconded by Mr. King. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, call for the vote.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
This is next on the agenda is Oak Landing preliminary plat, subdivision with improvements. Brad Marcotte is the developer. Macklin Taylor is our engineers for the project. This is in Mr. Scooter's area, Ward 2 water off of Dunn Road. It's a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the preliminary plat for Oak Landing contingent on getting required signatures to move the right-of-way. And I believe the only required signature we need was Mr. Brad's signature. He lives there, actually. So I think he's going to take care of that and move forward.
Yeah.
So it's a recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve this.
Mr. King?
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Motion by Mr. King, second by Mr. Gurley. Bubba, is that you?
That's me.
I'll let you second if you want to.
Any
We didn't want to hear that.
discussion? Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Liddell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wasson?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is another commercial project, Brandon Thompson's funeral home. This is located also in Mr. Scooter King's district,
We need to turn that off. Anyway. Okay?
off of Florida Boulevard. I
I know
think
right
Mr.
where it
Scooter's aware of it, what's going, what's coming down.
Yes, sir.
It's a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the preliminary site plan for Brandon G. Thompson's funeral home.
It's actually across the street from my district, but I'll take it. I got north of 190. I like
John.
funeral homes.
A motion by Mr. King,
I'll make a motion to accept it. Yes, sir.
I'll second.
second by Mr. Harris. Any discussion? None being called for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Liddell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wasson?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is a revision of a subdivision with improvements. This is Arbor Walk, fifth filing. The developer, First Horizontal, Macklin and Taylor. This is in Mr. Jeff Averett's district. It's a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the revised preliminary plat for Arbor Walk, fifth filing.
Recommend any motion from the board. Motion by Mr. Jeff Averett to approve this planning commission.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Shane Mack. Any discussion? None being, please call for the vote. Ms. Sandy?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Liddell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wasson?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is the future development for Arbor Walk's second filing, track DP2, preliminaries plat. What this was is was going to be a detention center, and we wouldn't let them build on the outside of it, but they revised the plans and we presented it to the Planning Commission, and it is a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the preliminary plat for track DP2 in Arbor Walk, second filing. And that also is in Mr. Jeff Averett's district.
Motion by Mr. Jeff Averett.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, call for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Liddell?
Thank you.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
The next item is some planning commission board reappointments. The first one on the agenda would be Mr. Jeff Ard.
I'd like to appoint Mr. Norman Engler for District 1.
All right, there's a motion by Mr. Ard, seconded by Mr. Girlinghouse to appoint Mr. Norman Engler for the planning commission. I personally know Norman. I think he's a fine choice there, Mr. Ard. Any discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Liddell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Next item, or the same item, but the next appointment is recommended by Mr. Shane Mack.
That's right. Before we get started, do we need to remove anybody to take that spot?
No, their terms
They resign.
run with ours.
Okay. Yes, I'd like to say, Mr. Gary Glasscock has been on the planning commission for quite some time, and it was important for me. He asked me to say some words about that planning commission. He said he thought a lot of you guys, he enjoyed working with you. He said that, and by no means his resignation meant anything negative. He just has become very busy. He works for the town of Albany now, and he's on several other boards, and so he asked to resign for that. So do we need to make a motion for that?
Accept his resignation?
To accept his resignation?
No.
His term ended.
No?
Yeah,
Okay.
so-
In saying that, we have a good replacement. I'd like to make a motion to add Jerry Glasscock from Albany to the Planning Commission. Jerry Glasscock is well qualified. He's a leader in the Albany area. He has a lot of maintenance experience. He works for the school board maintenance department. He goes to church with me. He's a leader. If there's anything that needs to be done at the church, Jerry's up there building it, helping everybody. So I make a motion to add Jerry Glasscock.
What a fine presentation, Esther. Shame that guy.
Jerry
I vote
Glasscock,
for the guy.
Jerry Glasscock is special to me. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I'm a little emotional putting him on there because I know what a fine fella he is, and I know he's going to do a good job and work with you guys to
Is there a
lead
second?
Livingston Parish where it needs to go.
That's what we need.
Second by Mr. Jeff Avery. Any discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes, is he here tonight?
He is not here tonight. He couldn't make it, but
All right, well, the next one,
he'll be at the meetings. You can bet on that.
the next appointment would be a recommendation by Mr. Tab Lobel.
I don't have anything near that. I wish I could have been before that, but so here goes nothing. But I want to appoint Justin Young. He's in the construction field, and I think he'd be a good addition to the planning commission. So Justin Young.
Justin Young. Motion by Mr. Tab Lobel for Justin Young, seconded by Mr. Jeff Ard. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Next item is a recreational district number 2. This was requested by Mr. Gary Talbot.
We, at the last rec board meeting, in Watson, Kenneth Graves resigned. Kenneth's intention was to resign after the original tax was up for renewal. And when it failed, he felt obligated to stay on the board. And, he stayed till the tax was, the second tax was passed. And, he waited till January to, announce his resignation. So I'd like to make a motion at this point in time to accept the resignation of Kenneth Graves as, from Livingston Parish Recreation District 2.
I second that.
Motion by Mr. Talbot, seconded by Mr. Bubba Harris. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, call for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Okay, now I need to make an appointment.
Okay.
I guess I could have done it one time, I'm sorry. At this point in time, I'd like to appoint a replacement for Mr. Kenneth Graves, and that person being James Brandon Clark, and his term will run until Mr. Graves' term was expired, which I believe is, February 14th of 2017, Sandy?
Mr. Kenneth Graves he will expire February 13th, 2018.
Oh, excuse me, 2018. But I'd like to make that motion to appoint James Brandon Clark.
I'll second that.
That's fine. Motion by Mr. Talbot, seconded by Mr. Harris. Any discussion? Ms. Sandy, call for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Next item, item 15, is Gravity Drainage District. Number 1, I've asked that this be put on the agenda. For Gravity Drainage District 1, we've had a resignation from the board. Mr. Roy Zachary has resigned, and I'd like to ask that we accept his resignation, and I believe we don't need a motion and a second for that. But I'd like to ask that this board appoint Mr. Chris Whitmire. I've known Mr. Chris Whitmire for a long time. He's a retired architect from the state, and I've spent some time talking to him. He really wants to work hard to give back to the community, and again, I don't know if it's a presentation like Mr. Max, but he's a great guy. So I'd like to make a recommendation that we have a motion for that.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Girlinghouse.
Second.
Second by Mr. Shane Mack. Any discussion? None being called for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Liddell?
Yes.
Mr. Averitt?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Before we get to item 17, I'd like to refer to the,
16.
I'm sorry, Mr. 16, Mr. Jeff Averitt.
What we have here on 16 is the gravity drainage district in the south of the interstate in my district, Tableauville, and part of Shane Mack's district. This board they haven't done anything with it since they started, and it says, we want to get it off the ground and get it going. And we're not gonna make any appointments tonight, but we want to just get the board
So
activated.
the district's been appointed.
Yes.
Boundaries are made.
Boundaries are made.
You just need board members, and we're going to start
Yes.
moving forward with that. Well,
Yes, ma'am.
fantastic.
And that's something in our districts is drainage. We get a lot of drainage problems down there. And that's something, I think that was part of our campaign was drainage. And that's something we want to start working on.
I think that's a good place to start. You know, get that restarted and get your board members in place, and we'll see what we can do on
Okay.
getting them projects going.
Okay. Do we need a motion for to start gravity drainage district, Chris?
Now, do we have a board?
We just have to get it going again.
So just, you don't need a motion then? Okay. Listen, I made an error a while ago on gravity drainage District 1. I mentioned that we didn't need a motion and a second to accept the resignation of Mr. Roy Zachary. So,
We do.
but we do.
Okay.
So can I ask that, thank you, Mr. Averitt, for making a motion to accept the resignation of Mr. Roy Zachary, who's served for years on the council, on the drainage district, and seconded by Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse. And with that being, any discussion? Ms. Sandy, call for the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Liddell?
Yes.
Mr. Averitt?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to say one thing in reference to this, that Mr. Zachary served for, I think, like 5 years or maybe longer, 7 years, on the drainage board. And in that time, he did a fantastic job. He helped better the drainage problems in our district. And without the work of everybody on that board and him, we still wouldn't have the drainage that we have today. So I just want to thank him for the service and the job he done.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, that was very kind of you.
Thank you.
Before we get to item 17, let's take up an item on the addendum, A2. It's to add roads and streets to the capital outlay and priority road list. I've asked that this be put on here. To start getting streets overlaid on the priority list, we've got to put them on there. I have spoken with the mayor of Denham Springs. He's requested that these 3 streets be added: Wesley Street, Dixie Street, and Maryland Street be added to the capital outlay and road priority list. And I believe Mr. Gary Talbot would like to add to that as well.
I'd like to add Bush Lane to the priority road list. It's a gravel road. It's in District 2. Not a lot of people that live on it, but it is the only access to the high school property other than Highway 60. And so, because of that, and a request from the school board, I asked that we put it on it and let the engineer evaluate where it falls in that program. But until it's put on the list, it can't be evaluated. So I'd like to add Bush Lane to the priority road list.
All right, we've got these 3 and number 4, and Mr. Harris?
Yes, I have 3 that I would like to put on the list. And one of them is in my district and Mr. Averett's district. It's a Joe May Road, and he knows about it. We've discussed it. And the other one is the Hill and Hood Road. And the third is, and I don't live anywhere close to this, but it's Harris Road.
Oh, here we go.
Glad you clarified.
All right, is there a motion from the board to support those, adding
I'll
those
make a
roads?
motion to add those roads to the
Thank
priority
you,
road
Mr.
list.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. King, seconded by Mr. Talbot. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Item 17 is to set the speed limit on West Street to 15 miles per hour. This was requested by Mr. Tab Lobel.
It's set at 15 from one direction and 25 from the other right now.
That makes sense.
So, it's a very congested little area, and, you got grandparents living on one side of the road with, their kids and grandkids on the other. So I think, it's congested as it is.
It needs to be
I want-
15.
Yeah. I talked to some of the folks on the road, and they're for that.
Resolution by Mr. Tab Lobel to lower the speed limit to 15 miles per hour.
Or at least make it consistent.
Is 15 good? I mean,
Yeah, that's good.
okay. And second by Mr. Avery. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Item 18, I've spoken to the gentleman who requested this to be on there. I think he went through Mr. Tab Lobel, and he still has a lot of stuff to research before he brings it to us. He said it will come to us in a later time, so he asked that we pull this item for tonight.
Okay.
Item 19 is a resolution of non-support for the Baton Rouge Loop, Mr. Gary Talbot.
Neighbors in Action approached me about putting this item on the agenda. They would like to come speak to us. There's no need for me to try to explain it to the council when they've lived with it for 5 or 6 years and studied it. So at this time, I'd like Mr. Gene Baker or Mr. Bob Watts or both to come explain to the council their reason for opposition and why they would request that we support it.
If you would, give us your name, where you address and where you live, please.
I'm Gene Baker, and I live on Perkins Road, 35399 North Perkins Road. I represent, as Gary said, the Livingston, the neighbors that oppose the loop. We're a group of citizens that have been studying this situation for a long time. We certainly are not opposed to improving traffic. We know that's a major issue, but what we've really found is that this is not our answer. And what we've got in front of you is a resolution tonight that puts you, in the same boat. Mr. Ricks has already signed a letter in support. We had letters of support from the last two councils. This was last brought up in 2012, and we had letters of support from every elected official in the parish opposed to it. We had 3,500 individual signatures opposed to it. We're not sure why it continues to move forward, because it's actually been around for about 30 years, and the only people that have profited from it is the engineers that have brought forth the proposals for the funds. And the state, back many years ago, funded it in several $1 million, and then about a year ago, there were some funds that were federal funds that came down for about $625,000. The proposal is just not what we need. It's all in favor of the private side, the developer. It's a public-private partnership, and there are many things, all of which I think you have the letter of resolution that mentioned many things about it that certainly are not the kind of thing that we want in our parish. Livingston Parish has had zero input into the location, the design, or anything else associated with it. And so, until we can be a part of it and, certainly express our needs for improved highways, but we need to, at the same time, wisely spend taxpayer dollars to achieve that. This little project that they're talking about is $1.8 billion just for the north section of it. What could we do with $1.9 billion for our infrastructure in this parish? So we just ask you to go forth with a resolution to approve our opposition to that effort.
My name is Bob Watts. I live in Gary's district. I've been on this committee with Gene since 2009. We have lobbied the legislature. We lobbied the governor. We got the governor to line item veto $6 million that they snuck into the budget to do more study. And we thought we pretty well had it beat, but it's come back. So we're here to ask you guys to give us another letter in opposition. We're trying to get solidarity from all the legislators, like we did last time, the sheriff, and the sheriff and the school board, all the state legislators, the Mayor Walker last time, Bobby Font wrote us a nice letter. So we're just trying to show the Federal Highway Administration is the people who rule on this, solidarity. They're looking at environmental right now, and I don't know how much credence they're giving to anything we send them, but, it can't hurt. So we're just asking for your cooperation, and we'll continue to fight, and we'll keep you guys involved. I'm available anytime y'all want to talk to me. I can recite this stuff in my sleep. So, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Jean. Thank you, Mr. Bob. There any questions anybody's got? I'd like to make a motion. If you y'all got time to read the motion of the resolution, it doesn't oppose improving traffic. It just opposes this particular situation, this particular type of funding. So I'd like to make a motion to support the opposition of the loop by supporting this resolution.
I'll second it. Motion by Mr. Talbot, second by Mr. King, to adopt a resolution in opposition to the loop, based on what's written in the resolution.
Right.
Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Libel?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Next item on the agenda. 20, it's consideration of a recension of the Livingston Parish Resolution Number 13-173. I'm again going to give the floor to Mr. Gary Talbot. This is a request that he asked to put on the agenda.
This item came up at our last meeting. When we approved the minutes and reading through the minutes, there was one of the items was an increasing of the cap from $25,000 to $40,000 to pay the council's legal bill. And asking Ms. Sandy for some information with respect to that, I ran across a letter from the council attorney. The council had originally authorized $8,000 for outside counsel to try to enforce a writ of mandamus. And we're going to take both items together because they kind of coincide. So I don't want to confuse anybody, but we're going to try to address. I guess we can address both together.
I think so, as long as you mention that in your motion, we'll move to adopt both resolutions.
Okay. There was then they later raised the cap to $25,000, and they sent a letter to their council that the cap is going to be $25,000. There's a letter that came about dated December 15, 2015, from their legal counsel that said that their firm had billed $35,788.91 and suggested raising the cap to $50,000 so that they didn't have to come back to the council depending on what the outcome was, because based on their thought, no matter what the outcome of the writ of mandamus, that there could be up to $15,000 more worth of expenditure by the council's attorney in other motions that might occur, be it an en bloc hearing, a request for requerying, a writ to the Supreme Court. So, and that's direct from his letter. So given that, the fact that the council attorney has spent at a rate 3.5 times to 1 the parish president's attorney in defending this writ, that if you just extrapolate those numbers out, there was a potential of another $20,000 being spent on taxpayers' money. In my opinion, my humble opinion, that we've wasted about $46,000 to date, and we have the potential to waste another $20,000. So, you know, there's a two-part deal to this. We need to rescind the 2 resolutions that authorize the payment of the previous council's, couple members of the council's attorney fees. We're not against paying those fees. What we're against is the open-ended dollar amount that could be absorbed by this council and parish government. So there is a resolution, I think all of y'all have seen it, that Mr. Moody has approved and said grace over, that basically says we're gonna rescind the 2 previous resolutions that authorize payment. And I think it goes on to say that we're not against paying the bills. What we're asking is when there's a final resolution, that you bring the bills back to us and we'll review them. And if there's a positive outcome, we'll be glad to pay them for you. And at the same time, we would then like to move to ask our current council to dismiss the writ of mandamus and put this matter behind us and stop the wasteful spending of taxpayers' money. So I'd like to make a motion that happen, and I'd like to request somebody in the council second it.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Gary Talbot to adopt a resolution rescinding the previous resolutions by the previous council. A motion by Mr. Jeff Averett. A motion by Mr. Gary Talbot, second by Mr. Averett. Is there any discussion?
Question, does that include the?
Go ahead, Mr. Harris.
Of the mandamus?
Oh, yes, sir, it's both of them.
Both of them?
Yes, sir, both of them.
Okay, if I may?
Go ahead, Mr. Harris, I'll give you 3 minutes.
Henry Harris. I don't really have a dog in the hunt on the fees, other than, and I brought this up before, if we had some of our people, public servants, elected officials, maybe step across the line or something, it's not for me to determine, but you have a Fidelity insurance coverage. And instead of rescinding this 45,000 or 80,000 up the road, and Mr. Moody can clear us on this, would be subject to that claim, and the parish would not, and the town taxpayers would not be. And it's been, the council, previous councils have been quite reluctant to go against the Fidelity insurance, for whatever reason, but I submit that's a source of to get for the parish to have the money replenished to the taxpayers. And I request that you look at that seriously, get an opinion on it, and if you can collect it, everybody's happy. You're happy, taxpayers are ahead, and everything goes good. Now on the mandamus, Mr. Moody, home rule charter provides for the parish president to veto ordinances, but it does not provide the authority, which is excluded, to veto resolutions. Now we have another little aspect. Our Constitution provides for 3 branches of government: division of power, or the balance of power. That's what this mandamus is about. And based on that, and I have a question to you, how close on target am I? I know I'm right in the home rule charter and the Constitution. So why would that not apply in this particular situation and guarantee all the citizens of Livingston Parish the division and balance of power in our government process, and which would be defeated with the rescission of this mandate, from my perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
I'm not quite sure your question is, Mr. Harris, but if your question is about whether or not that council, this council or any council has the right to file a mandamus, I think they do. Do they have to follow every resolution? Does the parish president have to follow every resolution? Well, that's a different question. I would say the standard answer is that he has to follow most of them, but not all of them. If it's a matter that falls within strictly his province to make an executive decision, an administration matter, he can ignore a resolution of the council. That's what he chose to do here. The former council said, felt like that he should follow that resolution, and they filed a mandamus. This council has the authority, I think, then to go back in and rescind that. That's the subject of this motion.
Okay, I understand that. However, the 21st Judicial Court has ruled that there is a breach in the balance of power in the governing process of Livingston Parish Council. Looking at it from that standpoint, I think takes away any latitude of where the council can act or has the ability to act. The question could really be, how and why did this even get on the agenda?
Well, I can't speak to how and why, but I can tell you that the judgment that's presently pending is not a final judgment. It's been subject to an appeal by the parish president, so it's not enforceable judgment at this point. I think this council, being the plaintiff, could withdraw the lawsuit at any time, even now. That would moot the judgment.
The ruling is a matter of record.
Yes, sir.
Firm standing.
Yes, sir.
And that ruling has been appealed, not the breach.
It's not a final judgment, though, Mr. Harris. It's not a final judgment yet.
I understand, and thank you. You're always good to me. And all right.
Well, I like that, Mr.
I feel as one of the 130,000 citizens in Livingston Parish that you take away my true governing process and system if you rescind this court proceedings at this particular time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, your name, please. And address.
My name's Taryn Creekbaum, and I live in District 1. I'm a constituent of Mr. R. Council Chair, before I begin, since this is for two agenda items, 20 and 21, I'm kind of figuring I might have 6 minutes to speak. My comments are going to regard both of them. And believe me, I have considered that time limit because it was a previous time limit, and I practiced at home.
Go ahead,
And
Ms.
best I can tell,
Go ahead, Ms.
I'm
Taylor.
between 5 and 6 minutes. Thank you. Council, since there are other citizens here, as well as your legal counsel, who are more qualified to discuss with you the legal ramifications of your actions tonight, I will appeal to you from a common sense perspective. Thus, here are my 6 common sense reasons why these items should not be on tonight's agenda. Number 1, you should stay out of it. Common sense tells me it is just politics. And to make matters worse for you, it is politics of the past. This issue belongs to the past council and is their legacy. Many of you campaigned with a promise that you would stay out of the politics, bring a new and better leadership to the council, and most importantly, not repeat the mistakes of the past. Tonight is your first opportunity to make good on those promises. Number 2, a resolution is a wish. Common sense tells me you cannot change someone else's wish. It's just that simple. The facts tell me that any resolution made by this council or past councils does not carry the force of law. In reality, wishes made in 2013 and 2014 by the past council, your wishes tonight, and even my birthday wishes made this past November are all equal. I am frustrated that the 9 of you would take up time at your second official meeting to even consider this. Number 3, this is a moot point. Common sense tells me this discussion and any action you might take tonight cannot change the wishes or events of the past. This issue's path to a resolution has already been set. You should stay out of it and let it run its course through the judicial system. In addition, to remotely think that your wishes tonight are superior to those of a 21st Judicial Court judge is a blatant show of disrespect to our judicial system. Number 4, there is no benefit to the taxpayer. Common sense tells me this is a waste of my tax dollars. Official parish council meetings should be for the real business of this parish and should be of benefit to all taxpayers. Common sense tells me that the only persons to benefit from the rescission of these resolutions and the dismissal of the mandamus lawsuit are those who have a personal vendetta against the past council, or more specifically, council members Harris and Franz. I take offense to any council using this time to even consider doing a favor for less than the majority of citizens. Number 5, be careful what you wish for. Common sense tells me that it is unlikely that this council will serve for 4 years and there never be an occasion for any one of you to be interviewed regarding a controversial issue. Or that for 4 years, every one of you will be in total agreement with the parish president. So, when either of those times arises, and they will, your actions tonight could determine whether or not you will be supported by your fellow council members, whether or not Mr. Ricks will have to follow your wishes, and whether or not you will be able to seek support through the judicial system. Number 6, this is not your job. Common sense tells me that we are a home rule charter form of government. And according to the home rule charter, this council is the legislative branch of our government. Your tool of legislation is an ordinance. I know you have only been on the job for 4 weeks, but have any of you had a chance to begin your review of the legislation you are responsible for, the Livingston Parish Code of Ordinances? I hope so. It is quite large, and I am not sure that 4 years is ample time to complete the review. So time is a-wasting. There are many ordinances that are in need of amendment or deletion, and there are many new ones that need to be brought to this table. That is your job, and these meetings are designed to show us how you are progressing on your job. Finally, as an informed constituent, I am respectfully asking you to redirect your focus towards doing the job you were elected to do. Legislate. Get down to the business of creating a credible and effective Livingston Parish Code of Ordinances that will provide for our protections of property value and quality of life in Livingston Parish. Let that be this council's legacy. Thank you.
Ms. Bob.
Thank you.
Mr. Knight?
I guess, question. If we adopt this resolution, are we or are we not taking the advice of the Attorney General Inspector that reviewed this?
Is it, questions to me?
Yes.
Well, the prior council requested an Attorney General's opinion on the question of whether or not the parish president must follow the resolution and whether or not it would be appropriate to pay these fees either at the conclusion of the lawsuit or ongoing. A long list of Attorney General's opinions said that a public servant that gets sued or charged in a criminal case can, after he successfully defends himself, come to that public body that he's a member of and ask to be reimbursed his attorney's fees. But the Attorney General saw that there was a trend around the state that the councilmen and public bodies were being sued in their individual capacity. This lawsuit was filed against the former councilmen in their individual capacities. Strictly stated that in the petition. But the Attorney General said, gave the council the authority if they chose to decide that they were actually acting in their official capacity, and gave them the authority, if they thought it was appropriate, to pay the attorney's fees on an ongoing basis. They went on to say that's not the preferable way to do it. It would be more likely preferable to wait until after the matter is successfully concluded and ask for reimbursement. That takes away the problem of what happens if they're not successful. Then you have to pay their attorney's fees and they've lost the case, and how do you get the money back? That was one of the concerns. So does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, no.
And Ms. Creekbaum, we're taking the personality completely out of this. It's purely about the bottom line of the parish. This parish is not in great financial shape. I mean, it didn't take us long to figure that out. So consequently, if we can save $20,000 here or $20,000 there, it is definitely within our job description to try to resolve those issues. And I just think that I thought I'd explain myself well, that if we continue to let this go forward, there's no end in sight of what the legal bills could possibly be. So in an effort to quit wasting taxpayer dollars, the purpose of this rescission of these previous resolutions is to put an end to the lawsuit between the council and the parish president. As a councilman, I'm not interested in suing my parish president. As a councilman, I'm not interested in setting precedent that we're not going to reimburse a councilman if they get sued either. But what I am willing to do is if I get sued and I defend myself, then I'm interested in coming to this council for getting reimbursement. And that's all we're asking of the previous council, is that the resolution or the end of this thing come back to us with your bills, we'll evaluate them and pay them.
Put it on us.
We just want
someone else.
and so I think it's well within our job as the approver of the budget to do that. So at this point in time, I'd like to call for the question, if we have no other comments from anybody else, and put it to a vote.
Chairman Wascom, may I please?
Yeah, if you would,
I know that's
just
not proper. but
answer the
I
question,
made a
yeah.
comment that-
Just try not to repeat yourself, if you don't mind, Ms. Tarrant, I'd appreciate it.
I don't repeat myself. With all due respect, Mr. Talbert, I'm hoping to start off on a good foot with this council. I respect you and I acknowledge each of you and grateful that you stepped up to the plate. I respect your position, but I don't agree with it. Council Chair, in order to really do the job that this council needs to do, you need input from citizens like me. And for a citizen, it takes a lot for me to come up here. For citizens to see that a councilman is going to call out a citizen in the audience, that's not going to add to the confidence of others wanting to step up here, okay? I'm not your enemy. I can be your best tool. I can, because I'm going to research an issue and I'm going to bring forth the facts that as I know them. I am open and objective to hearing that my facts aren't the truth. But I'm not an idiot. You've got to present those with some sort of professionalism. I think that if we can do that, if we can create this rapport, this is your second meeting, and I'm sure y'all heard about me, and we're waiting for me to step up. Let's start it off right. I'm not your enemy, but this is my parish, and those are my tax dollars. So I think in order for you to keep it in the right place, Councilman Watson, or Chairman Watson, Wascom, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
See, I'm nervous. That's why I repeat it and I write it, so that I can read it.
That's fine.
We can't allow this. Again, that was my statement. I didn't ask questions, and I don't need a council member calling me out and trying to discredit or rebut my statements.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If
So-
I offended you, I apologize. It was not
I
my,
accept
it was
your
not,
apology.
it was not my intent.
I
It
understand
was
that.
not my-
I
it
accept
was-
your apologies.
okay,
Thank you,
You're gonna get
Mr.
those from
Talbot.
us if we mess up.
Hi.
We gonna mess up.
Mr. Richard, do you have anything to say that wasn't been said?
I actually have a couple of questions. It's like a multi-part question. Can you repeat, please? Can I stand up? Or-
Sure, come up to the podium.
Can you, Mr. Talbot, can you repeat how much has been paid out thus far?
Yeah, I got it right here.
And is there a cap? In other words, if the resolution is not passed, is there a cap as to how much of our tax money will go towards this? And then finally, I'm sorry, if you rescind the resolution, can we recover any money?
I'll start off. Currently, the parish president's attorneys have billed $10,171. The council's attorneys have billed $35,788.91. Is that, those numbers that you gave me, those are the correct numbers. There is currently a cap that the previous council did on their last meeting on December 17th, I think it was, that raised the cap from 25 to 40. Now, you would think with a cap at 25, they wouldn't have had to raise it to 40, except their own council overspent the cap. And their own council requested a cap of 50. Now, past history has shown that it really doesn't matter what the cap is. We're gonna spend what we need to spend is what is basically what I gathered from the letter that said, I've billed you 35,000, you need to raise the cap so you can pay my bill. And so basically, I mean, that's what started the whole process, is to figure out where is the end? You know, and so the problem is, in my opinion, $46,000 of taxpayer money has been spent, and all of us, when we were running for public office, all we heard about was wasteful spending with respect to infighting, and we're trying to put a stop to it. If we just let it go, we could possibly incur roughly another $20,000 or $30,000. I mean, and I'm just, we don't know. And secondly, I don't have a clue what the other previous councilman's bills are. And so for me to allow them to bring an open-ended bill would be physically irresponsible. And so all we're asking for is to put a stop to the wasteful spending of tax dollars. And if the other council members, the previous council members, defend their case in a positive manner, bring us the bills and let us evaluate. And then, because like I said earlier, and I'm not interested in setting a precedent where a council person can't do that. Trust me, because, you know, I'm liable to run my mouth and I'm liable to get sued too. And I'm not trying to be ugly about it. I mean, that's a possibility. And if that happens, then I'll defend myself out of my pocket. And if I win my lawsuit, then I'm going to come to the council and ask to be reimbursed. And so I'm not sure that anything we've asked is unreasonable. It's just that, you know, we're trying to be a caretaker of the tax dollars, and I think that's our interest.
We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Talbot. Mr. Harris, hold on, we got other questions, if you don't mind. We got other questions, and Miss, ask one other, Miss Quiz, room for one more question. Miss Bridget, did you have a question? Well, you just shout it out real quick, if you don't mind, because we really need to call for the vote here, and I don't want to just drag this on.
Bridget Rushing, Denver Springs, I'm your counselor. Why do you have to rescind 20? Why can't you keep it that y'all are going to pay? Just get rid of the mandamus. I'm just confused about that.
Because the other two resolutions are open-ended resolutions. They're directing the parish president to pay their bills, whatever they are. And I just think it's fiscally irresponsible to just give somebody an open-ended checkbook. I mean, look.
I understand that point, and I don't mean to cut you off. But if I was sitting in your place and being sued, I would want to protect my house, my home, my well-being. So I know that they're adding up, but if you plan on paying for them anyway, why are you taking the risk?
Because,
that's what I'm confused.
Okay, let's look at it from a pure. My partner and I went the other day and had to meet with an attorney. Okay, over an issue with someone that we're doing business with. Okay, The attorney gave us several options. He gave us several options to proceed. And we made a business decision based on those options of what our ability of recovery was and what our cost was. Now, if somebody else was paying my legal bills, I might have taken a different tack in that situation. But because I was paying my legal bills and I had to look at what my ability of recovery was, I made a business decision. And so all I'm saying is if you're not paying your bills, your perspective or what you think your perspective is, I mean, what you think you would settle for might be different. I'm just saying, if I send my kid to the store with his money, he's gonna get one thing. If I send him to the store with my money, he gonna get a whole shopping cart. And I mean, I hate to break it down, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you know, if you have the potential to spend your money, then your evaluation of what you were willing to do is different.
Oh, I get that. So you're saying if they change their course of action, this council will pay for it?
I'm not talking about their course of action. I'm talking about if you've got to pay a bill and you know that you are definitely getting reimbursed, you might not be concerned about what it costs. However, if you might not get reimbursed or the bills might not be considered justifiable, then you might not just continue to spend money without reason. I mean, I'm not trying to dictate what they do.
20 is basically saying that the council agreed that the bills are going to be paid upon the resolution, a favorable outcome. So why are we taking away 20 if that's what you're going to do anyway?
In this resolution, it says, be it further resolved that the Livingston Parish Council will consider possible payment of reasonable attorney fees once the lawsuit is successfully defended when there is a final judgment in favor of the formal counsel. So basically, it just says, if you get a favorable judgment, we're gonna pay reasonable attorney fees.
Who determines reasonable?
Well, you know, we've got an attorney right there that can just tell us what it costs to defend yourself in a given court of law, depending on what motions have been filed and the time frame.
I think you're opening up yourself for a can of worms, and if I was y'all, I would think you might be on the back end of this at one day.
Oh, I understand.
And we realize that.
We talked about it a lot. It's not something we take lightly.
Thank you.
We have a motion and from the council by Mr. Gary Talbot. We have a second by Mr. Jeff Averett to pass this resolution. No more discussion. Being none, Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Garlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is district attorney reports.
No report.
No report. Mr. Chris Moody. Next item is a committee report, which, let's pick it up with the Finance Committee. Mr. Gary Talbot.
We met the first time today. Ms. Jennifer Myers brought us a check register on bills paid in year-to-date. We looked at revenue year-to-date and the budget year-to-date. We talked about how we're going to address things in the future with respect to dollar issues put at the council. We're going to try to handle them in finance before they come to the council. And we didn't have any business to handle. We just talked about how we're going to run our committee in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. Next item on the agenda is item 22, is a motion to adjourn. Would that be in order?
I got something to say.
Oh, Mr. Shane Mack.
Guys, we have a tax renewal coming up, I believe, in March. If I'm wrong, please correct me. It deals with volunteer fire departments. It's a renewal tax for equipment and the things they need to protect us as citizens and help keep us safe. And I just wanted to say, I really appreciate volunteer fire department people that give their time to go out and help us. A lot of times, the volunteer fire department people are the first ones on the scene, you know, to kind of take care of the situation until people like Acadian Ambulance and stuff like that can get there. And I just want y'all to think long and hard when you're voting for that tax. We need our volunteer fire department people, and we need to support them in any way we can. I appreciate y'all. My good friend JoJo Foster from Albany asked me to say something about that. He's a part-time employee. He retired from the Hammond Fire Department out there, and he runs that District 1 out there in Albany. And appreciate y'all's help. Thanks for giving me those, whatever, 2 minutes.
Mr. Shane, is that for taxing for the district or for the entire parish?
I know it's for District 1.
It's for District 1, so,
It's their millage renewal that's been in place for.
okay, so it's a renewal for the millage for that district only?
Correct.
Okay, I didn't know. Well,
Appreciate your help on that.
anybody we can help support, we're glad to support you, Mr. Shane.
Thank
Motion
y'all.
to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Ard, second by Mr. Girlinghouse. Any discussion? None being, Ms. Sandy, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Ledwell? Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes, meeting's adjourned.